it's Emily, and I am here with my February reading wrap-up, so just reviewing everything I've read in the month of February. I do have weekly reading vlogs. I'll be sure to link all of the ones relevant to February down below, but let's just jump right in. It was a very up and down reading month, but I started very much on a high. I finished most of this in January, but did finish this in February, and that is Prayer of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And this one is a high political fantasy that involves dragons. I absolutely love this. I love the characters. I thought they felt so real and were really interesting to follow. There's a central female-female relationship that I actually really enjoyed, and I don't always like the romantic elements of my fantasy, or that's kind of the thing that sticks out the least to me, but I really loved it in this one. I absolutely loved the world building. I thought it was fascinating, and the world in this one involves an east and a west, and they have very different religions and cultures and relationships to dragons. There are different kinds of dragons in these parts of the world. West doesn't really trust dragons at all, and there's a whole set of political things going on there, and the east worships dragons as gods, and if you're chosen as a dragon rider, it's a huge honor. And you follow different perspectives from both parts of this world as they need to work together to defeat the threat of the Nameless One. And again, absolutely loved it. The world building could be a lot. There's a lot of names, places, histories, mythology, religion, and if that's not something you tend to like, or maybe you're new to political fantasy and it can be a lot to keep track of, this may not be a good place to start because it is just a lot to take in. And some people felt the ending was pretty rushed, and I can definitely understand this criticism given the pacing. I thought the pacing overall was great. Given the pacing, you're definitely working up to kind of a key event, and I definitely understand the criticism that that event took up a lot less time and a lot fewer pages than might be expected given everything that's going on and given what we're building up towards and kind of that build up throughout the book. But it didn't bother me, but I definitely understand it and would highly recommend if you love high political fantasy and you're not looking to get into a series. But it's still long, but if you're not looking to get into a series and you just want to dive into a world and finish the story, would recommend. I'm actually very excited to see if she writes anything else in this world in the future. She's hinted she might, so would love it. Next thing I read is Remembrance by Maggie Cabot. This is part of her Mediator series that follows Suze, who is a mediator and tries to just help spirits who are in between life and death and need to be guided along their way to the afterlife. And it's kind of later in the series, so I don't necessarily want to talk about the particular plot or kind of where she is in her life, I guess, situationally, because that develops over the course of the series. But in this one, you're following a little girl who an old friend of hers, or a friend of hers when she was young, actually she's still a kid, but one of her friends died in an accident, and her spirit is kind of following her around and trying to protect her. And she doesn't realize this, but Suze sees this girl's dead friend's spirit kind of following her around and trying to protect her, and so she tries to figure out why this spirit is being so protective and what she feels she needs to protect her friend from, and tries to help her through that. And this series is always just so funny. I love the banter. It's just so witty and snarky and funny and just super entertaining to listen to. I do go into it more in my reading vlog, but a huge trigger / theme throughout this is sexual assault of a minor, so do keep that, or referenced history to sexual assault of a minor, so keep that in mind. And the next one that I read was a nonfiction called The Grid by Gretchen Bakke, and this is, as I said, a nonfiction about the US electrical grid system, the technology that allowed it to develop the way it's developed, the history of why it's developed the way it has, and the changes that it will need to undergo in order to integrate renewable technologies and clean energy going into the future, and why so much change is needed and what can be done to help renew the grid system and put it into the 21st century and help the US moving forward. So if you're interested in that subject at all, would recommend. I thought it was well written, well researched. This is her area of expertise, and I thought she told a very compelling story, and you know, did a very, very good job laying everything out and, you know, taking all of the complications and the human element of that into account, and not, you know, putting anyone down for the variety of needs that are in competition when you talk about distributing energy and distributing resources. Anyway, I thought it was really, really well done and would recommend if you are interested in that topic. The next one I read was Master of One by Jada Jones and Danny Bennett. This was a fairy loot book, and overall it was enjoyable enough. It was ultimately kind of in the middle of the road for me. I might not continue in the series, but we'll see. This one follows Rags, who is a thief and needs to steal a Fey relic on behalf of royalty in this world. And, you know, he's going to steal this Fey relic. Of course, things get complicated. There are conspiracies and different political machinations going about that he kind of gets put into the middle of. And, you know, it was enjoyable enough, but I wasn't super compelled by the characters or the world. I never wanted to DNF it, but will I be super excited to continue the series? Not really. I might not. I might. I don't know. But middle of the road for me. I then DNF'd Better Than Perfect by Simone Elkelis at about 100 pages because, and again, I talk more about this in my vlog, there were just so many random problematic statements. I wasn't compelled, again, by the characters. I didn't really care if they got together. Didn't really care what happened. So I just DNF'd at 100 pages. Don't really want to talk much more about it. I then read Winterkeep by Kristen Kishore. This is the 4th book in the Graceling Realm series, and I abso-freaking-lutely love this. No surprise there. I've loved every single book in this series. This is a series of companion novels. I would recommend reading them in order, but they are their own distinct stories. But there are some references and characters and things that it's good to read them in order potentially. But anyway, this one follows Bitterblue, who is the main character in the 3rd book, and follows her and her going to Winterkeep to investigate some people of hers who have gone missing, and it might have to do with the sale and trade of a resource that Winterkeep has. And so she goes to figure out what's going on. You follow Lavisa, who is the daughter of a couple of powerful political people in Winterkeep, as this is discussed, and as discussions of this resource are being had. And so it's super interesting. I love the politics. I love the characters. They're fantastic. This world is just so interesting. They're magical foxes. I love the environmental themes running through this, as well as discussions of a lot of different stuff. I really love the way she just integrates conversations into her series and does them in such a great way. And I adore everything about this. I love it. Please read this series. The next thing that I listened to was Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This follows a group of female scientists who are the 12th expedition to a mysterious area called Area X, and they're going to investigate what's so mysterious about this area, why expeditions into the past have always had mysterious things happen to them. There's just so much shrouded in this area that is just unknown. And so you follow this 12th expedition going in and exploring a couple of areas in particular of this area. And it's an unreliable narrator who's very upfront about not being a reliable narrator. You don't really know who to trust, what's going on, if you can trust the main character's senses even. And I thought the writing style was super interesting. I thought it was just super compelling and interesting, and I was super intrigued to see what would happen next, and I'm very interested in continuing this series. The next book that I listened to was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I'm not going to talk a ton about the plot of this one. This was a super popular series. This follows Alina Starkov, and it was written a while ago, but, you know, what are now very used and common tropes of, you know, Alina finds out that she has magical powers or magical abilities. She needs to be trained in these abilities. She goes to a palace to be trained in them. There are mysterious characters that she meets there. She doesn't really know who to trust. She finds out things are more complicated than they first appear, and she is told that she needs to hone and use her magical abilities to contain, you know, a threat in this world. Anyway, I thought it was a super entertaining and fun, but typical YA fantasy. I genuinely had a good time listening to it. I also love the narrator, which helped, but I genuinely had such a fun time listening to this, and definitely want to continue the series and see if I like the next two as well, and then continue on hopefully to the Six of Crows duology. I mean, is it anything special? Not particularly, but is it entertaining? Yeah, I thought it was entertaining. Does it deserve particular ire as a trashy YA fantasy series? I don't think so. I think it's a pretty typical standard YA fantasy, and if it's something you enjoy, I feel like it's does the tropes well enough. But anyway, I had a fun time with that one. I then DNF'd American War by Omar El Akkad at a bit over 60%. This is a piece of climate fiction that follows a family. There's a futuristic American Civil War between the 2070s and 2090s, and you follow a family from Louisiana who goes to a refugee area and their experiences during the Civil War, and it was just a lot slower than I was hoping it would be. There wasn't a ton going on and ultimately I just got bored and didn't necessarily want to continue or figure out what was going on or what this family's experience would be later on in the Civil War. I just lost interest, and so I DNF'd it at about 60%. I then finished Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. I had read most of this during grad school, but had some more to finish, and I finally finished it out. And this is, of course, a piece of really pivotal environmental nonfiction. It was published in the 60s and really helped galvanize the environmental movement, in particular here in the United States, but it was definitely also influential in other places as well, and focused on DDT, but really just questioned questioned our use of chemicals and just in general our use of the environment for our own gains without really understanding what we're doing, what the impacts are, how these natural systems work, and how messing up one thing really has a chain reaction of things that can happen. And we really just do things without understanding any of the consequences to the natural world, to our own bodies. And she uses DDT as an example of this, but a lot of what she's talking about is still so relevant today. So definitely very interesting. I'm glad I finally finished this out. Would highly recommend just as a piece of history on environmental thought that is still, again, super relevant. The last thing that I finished in February was Flight Behavior by Barbara Kingsolver, and this is, again, a piece of climate fiction. I'm kind of going through all of my climate fiction, and this one I actually really enjoyed. This follows De La Robia, and she is a woman who lives in a small town in Tennessee, and on her property one day she finds a huge a number of monarch butterflies, and she comes to find out that they normally go to Mexico, but this year have actually wintered in Tennessee, and you know, it's a huge event. So really the story follows how this event changes her personally. You talk about her relationship with her family throughout the book and explore that, but really it's about how it changes her as a person and how it affects her community and how her community's reaction affects her, the media. There are scientists who are coming in to study what's going on, who are experts on the monarch butterfly and really want to study and follow the monarchs as they migrate. So scientists are literally staying on her property to help study the monarch butterflies, and really just her world begins to open up a lot, and she begins to question a lot of the decisions she's made or just kind of how she's approached her life, and this experience really helps change her perspective and, again, open up new ideas and perspectives and doors for her that she really wasn't expecting, and it changed her a lot. It was super interesting. I really loved the writing. It was a very slow story, but super interesting at the same time. I really just enjoyed getting to know her and following her experiences after seeing these monarchs. And I don't tend to love small town stories, but again, I thought this one was super interesting. And if that premise sounds interesting and you want to explore more climate fiction, this one was one that I really enjoyed. So that's everything I read in February. Let me know how your reading in February went. Let me know if you have any comments on anything that I read in the month of February. Of course, subscribe for more bookish content. I will be sure to leave my Twitter and Instagram link down below. That's where I like to hang out. I will leave more resources for how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.